Welcome back, everyone. It's maintenance day again.
So as happens with any piece of equipment, maintenance comes up. And in the case of today, it's going to be looking at some of the tracks for the excavator. What we notice here is that these should be nice and evenly spaced. And on one side, we have that. On the other side, we are getting to the point of near failure where this was evenly spaced, but then these cables right here snapped, and you can see that this is now on an angle coming out, and that spacing is much bigger than the one next to it. And you got a similar situation here before it kind of comes back to normal. So anytime I'm trying to tension this, we're just ripping more and more rubber, so it's time to replace it. Luckily, this industry loves to get things to people who are trying to make money with their machines. So this thing was able to ship in about a day. So we're going to spend a few minutes today swapping out the old track for the new one.
I'm going to interject while editing to point out that this track weighs in at just over 600 pounds. Thus, I'm taking any opportunity I can to use other equipment to help with the job. And with the forks loaded up, it's time to move the truck out of the way and set up for the swap. You'll see me realize that I've laid it out backwards, but it's a quick turnaround and we're ready to lift the machine and move on to the next steps.
All right, so we are now off the ground on both sides. You saw me bring the track kind of into place. One thing I wanted to point out, because you watched me deal with it, is that these treads are actually directional. So these are kind of grooved to help shed mud and dirt as you're traveling in your typical forward direction towards the blade. You'll see that both of the tracks that are already on there have a similar type of lug pattern, and it is directional. You flip it around, and you could end up doing a little bit more damage when you're traveling in your normal orientation. Yeah, they're bi-directional, so it's a risk either way, but might as well do it to the recommended procedure. So now we're just going to clean out up underneath there and try to get everything loosened up, starting by loosening up the grease fitting that's down up in here. And see if the camera will actually give enough light on there. You can actually see the grease fitting now. So we'll just pull that out, let that grease come out, and that'll let the idler come in. So that'll give us plenty of slack to yank this guy off and put the new one on. But first, we're gonna kind of clean up.
Knocking out the loose dirt here really aids with a few things. First and foremost, it helps prevent contamination in the soon-to-be exposed grease fitting. Second, it helps with inspecting all of the other rollers for condition while the track is off. And, since dirt and sand is abrasive, it'll keep the machine generally clean and aid in the longevity of the system. Now here we're taking another look at the grease fitting. On this machine, it's a 19mm or 3/4 nut that needs to be loosened and only about 1/4 to 1/2 of a turn. That exposes an escape for the grease to come out and relieve pressure on that idle roller. The weight of the track is enough to pull that in quite a bit, and I used a rag to help catch any of the falling grease just to make it a little bit cleaner overall. In total, it's about 1/4 tube of grease that comes out. And as I'm in the middle of this step, my sister arrives to give me a hand with the track swap. Now, she's spent several years as a heavy equipment mechanic, servicing everything from 50-ton cranes all the way down to mini skid steers. So I was able to leverage a little bit more experience than I had doing this. We then used a couple boards to finish pulling in the idle roller before trying to raise the machine up a bit more. As it turns out, my machine has some built-in safety limits to prevent using the boom and blade in combination to get more than just a couple of inches off the ground. But a small pivot, and we've got the distance we need. Now here's where I would have had an extreme struggle if I was trying to solo this operation. Prying at the track to disengage it from the sprocket in concert with running the drive motor would have proven impossible without a little help. Luckily I have that help, and after a little experimentation with the best leverage points, we've got the track off. Rolling the track out of the way, made sure to do a quick inspection of the undercarriage to make sure all the rollers and guides were still serviceable. It's a plenty beat-up used machine, but it'll work a bit longer yet. With that step done, it's time to reverse the process. I use the tractor to push the new track in place, practice a bit more of the prying, and once engaged on the sprocket, it's on to refilling the grease and the tension mechanism. It'll go by quick on video, but you may notice I'm using an electric grease gun. If you have to do this sort of task, I highly recommend one of those.
All right, and there goes my help. everything is all wrapped up and ready to go. The new track is on and tensioned, and we can see that I managed to clean everything out, which is nice. New tread should last another 1,000 hours, 1,500 anyway, if not more, depending on what I'm doing. Mostly flat tracking, so it should go a while, provided I don't just leave it in the sun. You see these lugs are quite a bit deeper than the ones that are on the remaining track, which, although not ideal, is still serviceable. When that goes, at least I learned it's not that big of a deal to change these out. It was also quite a relief that the front idle roller here collapsed, no big deal, and there was not really anything impeding any of the movement. All of the idle rollers at the bottom are nice and tight, and there's nothing sloppy about them, and they're all rolling freely. So even though this was a used auction machine, it looks like it'll still keep going for a little while yet. All right, so with the excavator track fixed, it's going to be on to getting started with the house just as soon as our building permit is issued. And we've already got that sort of staked out, at least the rough outline. So we are going to have to start from the corner of the house here and go back and take this whole perimeter, scrape that down about 6 inches or so to get through any of the organic material before we lay down our bed of gravel and start building. So we are looking at building our footers right at current grade and kind of building up and then backfilling against the house from there. If you go back to, I believe it's episode 5 or 6 of the Homestead playlist, you'll actually see the design for the house that we're going to set in this place. But with the excavator repaired and with the permits on the way, this will be the next step.